And thanks for joining us for our Lend series on parent and caregiver self-care. Tonight's topic is put your mask on first. It's a long ride. When I chose this topic a couple of months ago, I thought, what a perfect topic right before the holidays. We all need to learn how to take care of ourselves. Well, last weekend I realized exactly how important self-care really is because I was in the hospital for a few days. I'm going to be fine, but just makes you an eye-opener, makes you realize that you really need to take care of yourself first. So tonight's speaker is Marianne Hammond. Marianne is the Community Education Coordinator for Autism for Children's Mercy Hospitals and Clinics. She earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in Communications from Iowa State University in 1984. She joined Children's Mercy Division of Developmental and Behavioral Sciences in 2008. Marianne worked as a sales rep and then national account manager for a Minnesota pharmaceutical company from 1984 to 1993. In 1996 through 2007, she helped start the Fire Foundation. In 1996, a not-for-profit organization that helps children with special needs attend their home parish schools in the Diocese of Kansas City, St. Joseph. The Hammond's oldest child, Caylee, who is 26, has a profound intellectual disability and severe autism. She is the reason for her devotion to children with special needs. She and her husband of 31 years, Dan, also have a daughter, Julia, and a son, Daniel. Marianne. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to get started, and my understanding is that you can send in questions if you'd like. So here we go. I do give just a general disclosure at the beginning that just says this is my personal experience that I'm sharing with you. It doesn't reflect any of the views or the recommendations of Children's Mercy Kansas City. My view is partly faith-based, and that's just part of my self-care. But again, this is just my perspective and my version of self-care, not meant to guide anyone or offend anyone either way. So I'm going to put this microphone on and take my name tag from Children's Mercy off, and you can let me know if there's any problem with that. So I always think when somebody's talking, really what qualifies them, and as Stephanie mentioned in the intro, what qualifies me for learning about self-care is our oldest daughter, Caylee, who is 26 years old. Caylee has a profound intellectual disability, as Stephanie said, and severe autism. She had kind of an interesting diagnostic trail. She was originally evaluated when she was about 18 months old for the intellectual disability part. She started into services because she was language delayed from the very start, was evaluated by the autism team when she was about 3 years old, and then reevaluated when she was almost 9, because it was sort of as if the intellectual disability masked the autism. She's completely nonverbal. Cognitively, she functions at 12 to 18 months. So if you can imagine, as she's grown up, even through the best therapies and the best interventions and the best therapists, she still is nonverbal, although we know that we communicate a lot through nonverbal ways. So we understand a lot of what she wants. But the bottom line is she really is the light of our lives. And she has taught us a great deal about a great many things without uttering a word. In addition to Caylee, I give a little credit to our two typical kids. I always like to say typical because I don't like the normal and not normal. So I always encourage people to say typical. And, you know, you can say my child with special needs. And I also don't like to say my special needs child. I like to say my child with special needs because that's the way I view her. But anyway, Julia is 23 years old. She's a KU grad, a proud Jayhawk, and a kindergarten teacher with a certification in early education and special education. And when she was choosing her major, I was like, really? Special education too? And she's like, Mom, you know, come on, this is it. And I was like, okay, good. I just wasn't sure that I would have chosen it if I had lived it my whole life. And all of her life, Caylee was a part of it. They're 2 years and 9 months apart. Then Daniel, our youngest and our baby, our nest just totally tipped over a couple months ago. He's 19 years old. He is a freshman at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska. That's a picture of them the day that we actually moved Caylee into her group home. You'll hear a little bit more about that, but they're all smiles there. But I assure you, even though this was a very planned and vetted and wanted event, after that picture, we all got in the car and we pretty much sobbed all the way home. Caylee really in this picture is the only one that looks like she gets what's happening. And it's been a big adjustment, even with the best laid plans for all of us. But that's our little family. I also thought it might be helpful to understand, again, on self-care of what's required of taking care of Caylee. And so after I've rehearsed this talk a couple times, I'm like, well, they don't really know what she requires. So I'm going to give you a little snapshot of a day in our lives. So she requires complete support in all activities of daily living. Again, at that 12 to 18-month-old, just think of a 12-month-old or an 18-month-old. But as her body grew, that still was about where she was going cognitively. However, some of her feelings are typical of that of a young woman. For instance, she's very attracted to attractive men. And we joke that she only likes the cute ones. She doesn't like the non-cute ones. So she's very discerning. And so that's, of course, can be really funny at times. It can be a little embarrassing. It's pretty remarkable when she really flags out as typical. What a typical day entails is showering her, toileting her, dressing her, getting her food ready, scheduling her helpers. We insist that she exercises, so that piece of it, feeding her, helping her be fed. Although I will say, interestingly enough, since she's moved into her group home, they have gotten much better about making her feed herself. And guess what? Even that, with practice, gets better if you have to do it over and over again. So that has been one of the really cool independence thing that she's gained out of our care, that we're really trying to reinforce when she is home with us. Giving her her meds. So the typical day would start about 6 a.m. with showering, med administration, toileting. Then after that, dressing her, getting her ready, getting her lunch ready, cutting up her food. Caylee requires all of her liquids to be thickened, so you have to do that. And then, getting her ready to go for the day. So she helps with dressing, and like she'll stick her arm out or her leg out, but basically she doesn't orient front to back, things like that. So I was always very fussy about the way she looked, and I still am. I still do her laundry to this day. Because I always said I was never going to have the way she looked be a barrier between her and the world. And so we joke at the Hammond house that she was usually the best looking one going out the door in the morning. And I don't know exactly, I hang her outfits for her during the week, but I'm sure there's some modifications that happen. The hardest part, without a doubt, is the nonverbal part. That's hard for everyone. That's hard for the people that take care of her. That's hard for us. It's excruciatingly hard when something isn't right, and the way she communicates with us is by her behavior. And so that is something that, hands down, also her inability to report makes you worry about the world in which she encounters at times when things aren't going as planned or something seems to be remiss.
Marianne, we had a quick comment here on Facebook that says, a mama after my own heart, always got to look good.
Always got to look good, because I just always felt like that just would be no reason for people not to want to go. And different times at school, at day service that she's at now, interestingly enough, very often, they'll thank me. Thank you for showering her every day. Thank you for, keeping her hair cut, her nails clipped, those type of things. I just felt like it was the one dignity thing that I could give her. And And she's so dang cute anyway, so it was easy to do. An amazing sense of trust in other people, and remarkably, an incredible judge of character. She kind of gets people's deal when she meets them, and some people that maybe aren't our favorites aren't necessarily her favorites either. I mean, it's kind of remarkable. So that's what I say is confusing about the cognition and yet her response to people and the accuracy of that response based on that cognition. Okay, so how do families like ours feel? Well, overwhelmed, guilty, grieving, sometimes unprepared, and without a doubt, stressed. And so those are kind of the subjects that I'm going to focus on tonight, as far as addressing on how do we deal with those feelings. I think that anytime you have kind of an unexpected outcome, which I will say Caylee's diagnosis of autism and profound intellectual disability was a gargantuan surprise outcome. And so that feeling of overwhelmed, and then the guilty part was, well, was there something I did that I could have prevented that? Certainly I felt unprepared, even though I had her at 31 or 32. I felt unprepared for that unexpected outcome, because that's not what you anticipate when you have an uncomplicated pregnancy and go forward like that. Stressed, I always find this one to be kind of funny because there's just so much stress out there, and I'm going to talk a lot about actually stress and what it does to us. I don't know exactly how you can't be stressed when you have a kiddo with such great needs. And the grieving part is one that I'd like to get on the table right away, and that is that it's not what we thought it was going to be. And so if you ever study the stages of death and accepting death, that if somebody's you love has died, grieving, just that feeling of sadness and kind of denial is part of it. But I feel like also so is anger. And I do know that for a period of time, I remember once when my mom said to me, maybe 3 years into Caylee's life or 4, she said, I remember her saying to me at one point, and I have such a sweet mom, she said to me, well, at least you're not so angry anymore. And I was like, whoa, okay, so that's how I've seemed, is angry. And I think that was part of dealing with the grief of the unexpected outcome. So I'm happy to say 26 years down the road, I'm not feeling angry anymore. I'm feeling very tired and really, blessed at how we've come along. I think you have eventual acceptance. But no matter what, sometimes especially at big transitions in their life, graduating from, I remember when she graduated from 8th grade, it was just so sad because all those kids were going on to high school and going with their friends, and she had a little different route to a different high school. And I just remember feeling so bad and thinking, it's never going to be the same for her. Honestly, her high school graduation, I couldn't even attend. That's how sad that night was for me. And I knew she would never keep on the cap and gown. And I knew she'd never really walk the way they wanted her to, because she graduated with a big class of hundreds of kids. But so once in a while, I tell people, give yourself grace for you, for what you need, because she didn't care that she didn't go to graduation. She didn't understand it. But, if your kids do, it might be a very important thing. One thing we suggest from the start, we suggest this at Children's Mercy. I know that our friends at KU suggest it. Become an expert on your child's diagnosis. That will help you be the best advocate possible. And so know the special education law of your state. And so I've put up links to the special education links for both Missouri and Kansas on this page. Okay, so rather than going into battle, we kind of take a deep breath here, and in studying this and our response to sort of that feeling of going into battle, I'm going to suggest that we think about being a peaceful warrior rather than an angry warrior. That angry that my mom said that I feel, or I felt, or I was coming off. Think about, rather than aggressively going into battle for your kiddo, this Lisa Pinhorn, this blogger that I really liked, who's a mom of kids with special needs, she talks about filling your tank with exceptional compassion. And she said your energy will last longer. You can still get done what you want, but your energy supply will last longer. There's research also from Dr. Stephen Porges, and I read some of his stuff. He's a neuroscientist that finds, when our stress level is high, we tip into that fight, flight, freeze more often. And this has long-term impacts on everyone, typical people and those with special needs. So that whole idea of learning to sort of self-regulate and not always be on that fight, flight, freeze. Actually, it can even do damage to organs and things like that if you sustain in it for a long period of time. We've seen kids with trauma, even from a very early age, that have, I know a child that was badly treated, terribly maltreated, even before the age of 18 months. And then went on to have years later consequences of that trauma. Again, always being in that fight or flight thing of raising your adrenaline, all the things that it does to your body. So let's think about being a peaceful warrior rather than an angry warrior. And I have always said to my families in learning how to be an advocate, and also just because I love the communication part of relationships, positive attraction always works better than negative. So learn to communicate with the assumption that whomever you're encountering is also out for the best interest of your child. So you can start from that assumption, and then if it seems that they aren't, there are some adjustments that you can make, but thinking that they're there to take something away or minimize something or give you less, it's just kind of a bad way to start. So I say start with that positive attraction, that positive standpoint, and then go forward from there. Without a doubt, today in 2019, we are parenting in an age of toxic stress. I have, a 23-year-old and a 19-year-old, and I see how much time they're on their electronics. I see how much time their friends are on their electronics. I see how much time my friends are on my electronics. Today, I did not wear my Apple Watch because I didn't want it buzzing on me while I'm speaking so that I would be distracted, so then I would see what it was going to be. So our bodies and brains, this Stuart Shanker from the Merit Center in Toronto, he's got a PhD in both philosophy and psychology. And he just says our bodies and brains are on overdrive every day, all day long. And he talks about this really fascinating emotional co-regulation, which means that the prefrontal cortex of a child's brain is not fully developed. It will regulate with the prefrontal cortex of the significant adults in their life. So he talks about it. It's sort of like a brain sync up, like a Bluetooth or a wireless connection between children and adults. So if our kids are having trouble, they're the mirror of us. So if our kids are stressed, we need to look back at ourselves and see what's going on. So stress behaviors in turn are reduced when the inner brain connection between those two significant relationships is calm and regulated. So I thought it was fascinating, again, giving us a reason why we need to practice some of the things that will feel like safe self-care and get us less stressed. So I'm always saying to people, so what do you do? How do you do it? And especially my busy, working mom friends trying to do the things that I'm trying to do. So I'm just going to give you an example of how I felt I took care of myself. I will say I'm really happy that my being is a high energy being. I have nothing to do with the fact that that's kind of the way I'm wired, but I was always grateful I was. So exercise has always been a big part of my deal. I often did a 5 a.m. workout because that was the time that I could go, that everybody was sleeping in the house and I was available to go. And then also by 6 a.m., there was no better feeling to me to be driving in my car, home, still dark a lot of the time, and I had already spent an hour of something just for myself. I felt like I had gotten a bonus on the day, kind of ahead of everybody, which I'm competitive, so I like that feeling too. And so now, since Caylee's not in our home, actually since now in the last year, all 3 of my kids have left my home. I've graduated to a 6 a.m. workout. I don't have to get up at 4:15 that many mornings, but I still like to start my day doing that because it influences my energy for the rest of the day. I don't do it every day, but I probably do it 4 to 5 days a week. When the kids were smaller and I had 3 little kids at home, actually I worked one evening a week. So I was mostly home with my children for a period of time until Daniel went to kindergarten. And I worked one evening a week and then sometimes on Saturdays. And I worked at something completely unrelated to children with special needs, which for me was really helpful on a topic that I loved and I was educated on, which I taught childbirth classes, and I was a doula for women that were in labor. So I loved it because it got me into something that I was interested in. It got me out of the house. I'm pretty positive there were a lot of nights that I lost money on the deal because if I had to hire a babysitter, because my husband traveled a lot when our kids were small, I'm sure I paid her more than I was making in the evening, but it got me out. It got me teaching on something that I loved. And it just had me thinking other than of my, everything that I was going to turn around and go home to. I had just a couple like-minded moms as friends that were in similar journeys. Actually, 2 of those closest to me, of course, they both have children with special needs. We still have coffee, several times a year. Even though our kids are pretty grown, but just, sharing similar journeys, just finding someone. A lot of times I hosted the coffee because I'm the one that couldn't leave my kiddo because she was an early riser. And so sometimes Caylee danced around us as we had coffee, but we were still able to share our stories and kind of understand each other's perspective. I had a couple of people in my life that would be what I could say save my day. There were times when Caylee was like a whirling dervish when she was small. I mean, she would come into a room, and I know a lot of us can relate to this. She would come into a room, and I would just survey it and see what she was going to take out. And that's with all the best ABA, all the best behavior training on my part, whatever, because she was so impulsive that she would knock over that water and grab those glasses and pull that cord out of something. And I mean, she just didn't stop. And so on occasion, actually, I remember one of the days that I called my lifeline because, of course, these were usually the times my husband was out of town. She'd already done several things that were just terrible. And I turned around at 1 minute to get the baby out of his thing, and she took a whole thing of apple juice, an entire pitcher of apple juice, and stood like this. And when you pour something and it literally went all over my kitchen. It took a good hour to get it, all of it. And I was like, that's it. I'm at my limit, because then what do I do with her while I'm trying to do it? Anyway, I called one of my friends and I said, I'm going to kill her. I am going to kill her. So if you could just come over for 1 hour. And she's like, I'm on it. I'm over. And there were a couple people that would just do that for me. And it didn't have to happen very often, but when it happened, it was very greatly appreciated.
There was a question.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. Is your daughter ambulatory?
She is. Oh, yeah. She can run. Yeah. I was and the last thing on this slide is that I was very organized regarding her care. I think this is one of the most critical things for self-care. If you don't know how to be organized, then have somebody try and teach you, because all of the things that you have to keep track of with kids like this, therapy schedules, school schedules, IEP schedules, medical schedules, I mean, it's so much harder if you don't have some sort of an organizational system. So I would implore anybody to have someone teach them. Get somebody that's really good in your life that you recognize as very organized, and have them teach you something about it. What else helped? Well, for me, and again, this is where I go to this is my story. I prayed a lot. I still do. I can't help but do that. Some people meditate. I do a little bit of meditation too. It just grounds me and centers me, and I need all the help I can get. So I just say you find what helps you. And did you have a question?
Yeah, I do.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of the people that are watching tonight are watching from rural areas.
Mm-hmm.
How can they learn how to meditate?
There's a couple of fabulous apps that are out now. One is like 10 minutes to something, but if you would just Google meditation apps, I'll try and find the ones that I thought I put them on here, but I can't see my notes, so I'm not sure. But there's a couple that's come a long way in the last few years for some meditation. They literally walk you through the meditation, and so it's not that you have to invent it yourself. For me, when I meditate, because my mind goes a lot, I try and think of emptying out. So I say, more of you, less of me, more of you, less of me. And I just I repeat that mantra over and over again to try and just empty my brain out, so that I feel like I can take on the day and not be so scattered in thoughts. But I know there's some great apps for meditation.
Make sure we add them.
Yep. We sought counseling as a family, and we took help from many, many people. We said no to almost no one, and not a tremendous amount of people offered to help us. Interestingly enough, I'm one of 7 kids. My siblings all have children. They were all very busy in their lives, and that's, I guess, another thing I would say as far as peace of mind goes. I have found through a lot of conversations with different families that it's often not necessarily your family that helps you. It's kind of those relationships of people that are doing some similar things. So I just tried not I tried to take away the resentment of some of the people closest to me not offering to help, because they were busy in their own life. They were doing the same thing but didn't have a kiddo with special needs. This is maybe one of the most important ones that we found to be helpful as far as self-care goes. We had fun with our typical children's activities. We just talked about putting in joy and experiencing joy where we could. So Caylee both of our typical kids, Julia was a soccer player, Daniel was a baseball player, and Caylee's gone to 1 million soccer games and 1 million baseball games. And what I loved about bringing her out into the community was that I always felt that in some way we were building capacity out there, because families learned to interact with her. These are a lot of the same people that I sat on the sidelines with for years at a time, and are really important people in our life. And when I still see them today, one of the first things they'll always ask about is Caylee and how she's doing. We laughed a lot. Fortunately, my husband, I think, could be a stand-up comedian. I mean, even in some of our deepest, darkest, saddest moments, he could make me laugh about Caylee. He does a great imitation of her. Often at the dinner table, he'll be the bubble talking on the side of her of what she's thinking really about the conversation that's going on, and often it's hilarious, and that is exactly what she's thinking. And so we laughter is a big a big coping mechanism for us. We celebrated Caylee's successes too, and this is what I also implore families: celebrate the things that you can celebrate. When Caylee was 2 years and almost 6 months, she finally learned how to walk. So she had real low muscle tone, and she had a lot of physical therapy, and we had a huge Caylee walking party, and like 100 people came because we invited our whole neighborhood, all of her therapists, all of the children that she went to school with, family, and that was really cool. Dan and I try and get away one weekend a year. Sometimes we're lucky to get away a little bit more than that, but on occasion there have been years where the getting away is going, 5 miles to the Country Club Plaza and, spending a couple nights in the Marriott, but it works for us. I mean, it just works for us. It's the idea of getting at least a little bit away. So those are some of the things. I also have some friends that are single parents, and we know that there's a lot of single parenthood there with kids with special needs. Of course, probably partly because of the stressors, the unexpected outcome, the things different than what we had planned. So I asked a couple of trusted the moms that I think are really doing it right out there, what about the single parent? So what did they find helpful? Because I wanted to be mindful of that. So I asked them, what resources did you think were helpful? And they said, free webinars, blogs, workshops, very helpful. I love this anything free, festivals, shows, concerts in the park. We did a lot of those too, because again, I feel like you're building capacity when you're taking advantage of things like that, and I love that idea of sprinkling our kids out there to the world so we all know how to interact even better. Talking to other parents who've been there and done that, I love that advice. And one of them said, as part of the waiver program that her child qualified for, she met with a parent support advocate and then also got on a waiting list for other services, since often the wait is many years. And she said, get on whatever lists you can, and we would concur with that. Other tips from a single parent, and I really thought this one was very interesting. She said, if you're divorced and your former spouse or partner is in the picture, have the goal of co-parenting. It can be very helpful to be on the same team. She gave me an example of they do a week on, a week off type of thing. And she said on her week where she had their son, she said she was just having a terrible time with him. And it occurred to her to call the kiddo's dad, and she ran the situation by him, and she said he gave her really good feedback of what he tries. She tried it, it worked. And so she said that was just such an advantage to be on the same team, to be trying to co-parent. If you don't have somebody to tag team with, if and when friends or family offer to help, say yes. I think it's often hard to say yes, but just do it. And it's really, I think it will be a help. I also love this one. Tell your story. You never know who's listening and what they know or how they might make your life easier. So what they might suggest. I know all of us, there are times when Caylee doesn't look her age. She probably looks like she's 14 or 15 and she's 26. But so different times people will, they'll say things like, have you ever tried occupational therapy with her? And I'll be like, years of it, yes. And or gosh, like it's the first time they've ever thought of it, and maybe this is a new idea to me, and I just try and graciously accept, because pretty much everything they throw my way, yes, we have tried that. But I think that's true. Some might have an app that they use for tantrums or something like that you could use. So it's always great to listen, and you don't know where somebody might make your life easier. Family dynamics. This was something as our kids grew older and grew up, and I think it's really important to give value to the feelings that they're feeling. We would have, when things often, actually it was usually when we were in a little bit of a crisis, we would often call a family meeting. And usually it would be after Caylee would go to bed, because she doesn't talk, and so she wasn't, besides kind of disorganizing the situation. She wasn't going to offer anything verbally. So after she would go to bed, we would have a family meeting and just kind of tell the kids what we were thinking about, what we're having a little difficulty with, if we were in a crisis about something, and then just ask them how they're feeling. And so often what I would say to myself is, don't interject, just ask the question and then let them give an answer. Because I would like to put a few answers in their mouth or whatever, but I just found that I just had to quiet myself and just let them talk. You can do something fun after. Some families I know do like a game or do a fun little activity after. It was whatever works for you. But I think it's really critical to communicate open and honestly and set a time when you can do that. So again, in the hubbub of life, we're feeling like we're giving value to what they're feeling and kind of checking in with them. I think that it's statistically proven that families like ours, meaning families of kids with significant special needs, often some of those kids can have some problems with depression and things like that because, often the one with special needs requires a lot more focus. So I know that one of the things in one of the family meetings that we had, I'll never forget it, and I don't have a fabulous memory because I joke that I've been sleep deprived for 26 years, but I do remember we were talking, and I remember by starting and saying, I just want to tell you guys that I'm really sorry for how much time Caylee's care takes away from things that I might be able to do with you. And then I stopped talking, and I see the kids and I see them thinking, and I'll just never forget. I don't even know which one of them said to me, but they're like, Mom, we know. And you know what? She's the best gift we've ever had too. So you don't have to apologize for her. We understand. We see what you're trying to do, and we know she takes a lot of time. Don't apologize for her. We know you can't change it. And I said, so on the things I can't change, I just want to go ahead. But I thought, wow, it made me feel better, them airing their thoughts, because I was kind of wrong about what they were thinking. What do you have to continually give yourself grace regarding? Also ask some people this question. And I loved these answers because I could relate to every single one of them. Balanced home-cooked meals. Okay, well, if cooking is your thing, and cooking is one of my things, it's one of my expressions of myself. I love to cook. That was actually a de-stressor for me if I was well planned in my week. If I'd done my grocery shopping, knew what I was having for dinner, had prepped some before I left the house. But otherwise, you've got to give yourself some grace on that because it takes a lot of time to do what comes before actually cooking the meal. So balanced home-cooked meals was one. A clean house was one. One mom told me she hired a cleaning service to come in every other week because she felt like the only thing she was doing with her time was the deep cleaning stuff, which wasn't fun when you're also working and trying to juggle a lot of different things. So she said, I made it a priority to hire somebody to help me with that. I love this one because I am a self-proclaimed perfectionist. How things are done. Putting away laundry my kids' way might not equal how I would do it, but it is done. Pick your battles. So I can totally relate to that one, the way my kids might fold their clothes, put away their clothes, things like that. Give it up. Lack of patience. We can all relate to that. Lack of communication with friends, not keeping up. The one thing I give myself grace on that, because I was often the connector of a lot of friends before I had children and certainly before I had Caylee, but I would give myself grace on that one by saying, you know what, communication goes two ways. They know that I have more on my plate, and so they can also get a hold of me. So, I mean, if I really wanted to, then I can, but I'm not the only one that can make that happen. So I've had to give myself, because I like to be connected, I've had to give myself grace on the fact that I can't be always the one connecting. And then, again, kind of saying it the same way, feeling guilty about how much time my child with special needs takes compared to my typical child or my children. you just have to let it go. We really did utilize, I felt like a really awesome thing for our family for a number of years was some respite programs that we had. And we had one actually that was about a mile from our house. It was Sib Shop, and they had a track for the siblings, and then they had a track for the kids with special needs. And it was just once a month, and it was just a really quality program. Again, brought in some youth groups from different churches, and I thought that also was building capacity because these younger kids learned how to interact with our kids with a lot of direction, and that was good. So I just listed out the programs in Kansas City for some respite care. I will say most of them have, some have waiting lists, but most of them also have quite long applications because they want to know quite a bit about your child. But here's several different programs, different places in the Metroplex that offer some options. Usually they're low cost to free, and just really a chance, even a few hours off can feel like a great deal of self-help. So we did that, and Caylee loved going to she would run into the building, so I would know that she loved going. We also, and again, this is me, we also found a great value in the camp experience. When Caylee was very small, I was positive she would never get the camp experience. And then we met the original owners of Camp Barnabas in Purdy, Missouri, and they invited us to come to camp when no one was at camp and invited us to bring our family. And so they met Caylee. These were in the very early days. This is 20 years ago. And we decided that at 7, when she was old enough, she could go. And this is going to be her 20th year going. And I don't know if she loves it. I think she likes it. But I will tell you, it was the 5 days a year when I felt she was completely and utterly taken care of to the nth degree. They have medical staff, they have trained people. She often had a 2-on-1 instead of a 1-on-1. I literally could feel my blood pressure go down as I drove out. I usually cry when I drop her off because they do this great fun thing that they're so excited to see the kids. And then literally as I was driving out the very long driveway, I would just feel like a gargantuan weight had come off my shoulders. I usually flew somewhere for a few days. My husband usually would let me go somewhere and he'd maybe pick her up, but it was great. In addition to that, our 2 typical kids went because also part of their ministry is for the siblings of the kids with special needs to have that experience and to have it with other kids that have the same situation. And we were just talking about this a few months ago because my kids have gone back and worked as missionaries at Camp Barnabas. And I was saying to them, they both now have to make a lot of money in the summer to pay for their lives while they were at school, or my daughter's a teacher. But I just said, did you really love being a missionary? They're like, Mom, it was the funnest weeks of our life. And then they started to tell me the stories about what occurred, and I was like, wow, okay. So it has a really, and just having a like-minded sibling that you could talk to that's dealt with something in their life similar. And then my kids would always come home and say, Mom, honestly, Caylee's a piece of cake compared to a lot of the kids that we encountered or that we helped take care of. So it would always give me perspective as well.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
on that. Did you, the first year you left Caylee there, were you just like waiting for the phone to ring the whole
Absolutely.
time?
Yeah.
Nervous?
I didn't go anywhere the first year.
How did you just
Yeah.
get through all
Well, here's the thing. They did call me. And they said, Marianne, and I love it because this is a classic camp nurse. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. But Caylee did seem to have an allergic reaction to the animals in the barn. I'm like, oh yeah, she's allergic to everything that has fur. And she had literally, like, her eyes were shut. And so they were like calling me to get permission to give her, you know, allergy medicine and things like that. And I said, yes, you can. And she, you know, had a little nap and everything went down. They've called me actually a couple times because a couple years ago she had a terrible virus that was going through the whole camp. And they have a well house. They have like a mini hospital infirmary there. And so they're like, she's spending days at the well house. Well, it's I swear, it was too confusing in her cabin. There's a lot going on. She's used to sleeping in her own room by herself. I swear, she wanted the quiet well house instead for a few days, and she wasn't feeling well. So yes, because they will contact you. But I love that they led with it. Everything's fine. She's fine. But we want to ask you about this. Clearly, as far as vacations go, expectations can certainly impact the success of vacations. So I tell people, if you're taking your kiddo with special needs, even with a well-planned vacation, just kind of lower your expectations and your serenity will go up. I typically would save money and bring someone along with us that could be kind of Caylee's special helper. It almost doubles the cost of the vacation. But if it was going to feel at all like vacation to me, I would do that, because I joke that, you know, when you pull that kiddo into an environment, even if it's one that you may repeat, like you might go back to the same place year after year, I just say vacation can sort of feel like hell in another place, because often many of the natural supports that our kids have, whether they have their quiet space or whatever, they typically don't exist on vacation. And so, vacations, I think, can be very hard. As Caylee got a little older, a couple of years ago, we tried something we hadn't tried at all. And I actually did like a staycation idea for her. And I made a whole schedule of fun things that she could do the week while we were on vacation. And I had a consistent helper that was with her for the week that she loved. So one of her helpers that she really, really liked. And then we went somewhere else. And like I said, it at least doubled the cost of our vacation, but it made me feel like I enjoyed it more. We did have to come back one day early because she had pulled 2 all-nighters by the time we were on the way to come home. But, you know, I didn't know that till the second to last day. So I had a really great helper. I think being prepared, it sort of goes with the being organized. Have your supplies handy, wipes. For us, she still wears a pull-up. She's schedule trained, but she still wears a pull-up. Wipes, an extra change of clothes, a pull-up. She has to have her liquids thickened, so I need to have the thicket with me. If they take meds, think of having their meds ready and take them, so that if you have the opportunity to be spontaneous, you actually could do it. If you decide, let's go out to dinner, or let's go to that festival that we're passing by, you know, whatever, you can seize the moment. So planning can really, really make a difference. Here's ideas of different research I did of other things that can help. This is another blogger and a mom. Get outside, take some steps, change your scenery, take in a little sun, even if for just a few moments. Some said use a portable light therapy energy lamp. Actually, I have a light therapy lamp in my office because I don't have any windows in my office, and actually I think it does help. Crank up the tunes, you know, get music going. We do that a lot at our house. We love music, so sometimes that'll lighten our spirits. This one is critical. Take care of your nutritional needs. Protein shakes right now are a really good and easy help. There's a lot of low sugar protein shakes that are 30 grams of protein, and it's just a way that you can give yourself a boost. She suggested tag teaming. If one of you sleeps better, then have them cover nighttime issues. If your kiddo has nighttime issues, you wear the earplugs. And then, you know, you can tag team it, or you can change that out. We used to do that because Caylee was such an early riser. She slept well, but we'd work during the week, but on the weekends she would still be up at 5:30 or 6, and so we would schedule who had that Saturday or who had that Sunday, so the other one of us could sleep. And sleeping in is like sleeping till 8, you know, because she was up at 5:30. So it's just a great idea to try and tag team if you have somebody to tag team with. I found that even 1 hour away could make a difference for me. Even 1 hour of going to the grocery store by myself. How about this? Going to Target by myself. I saw something the other day. Exactly. I saw a towel that I thought I was doing a little bit of holiday shopping, and it said if Target had a bar, it would be my perfect place. And I thought, now that it has coffee, it's good. Yeah, if they just added a bar, it could be your perfect place for an hour. You could go shop and get what you needed. But I found that 1 hour could feel like 2, and then I could kind of go back to finish the rest of the day. Here's what I loved about justifying self-care. Dr. Schenker, that psychologist and philosophy PhD from Toronto, says that if we would even take 10% of the love and energy that we donated to our kids with special needs, that we gave to them, if we just gave 10% of it back to ourselves, we would essentially be giving it back to our kids. Because again, they're reflecting how we seem if we're stressed, whereas if we would actually take 10%, just 10% of what we give them 90%, take 10%, give it back to yourself, it literally is like multiplying for you, and you do get it back, to give it back to your kiddo, because you're feeling more cared for by yourself. I also loved this. This was actually a recent gift to me, which was funny. I'll tell you why. It's funny because this is exactly what I needed for all those years. And now that my nest has been emptied, it's called Calm the Chaos. And it's Nicola Rice Taggart, if I'm saying her name right. And what I loved is that this is just a daily practice. Think of it almost as meditation in a journal form. And what she says is, she goes day by day and says, if I took care of myself in the following ways, and then you check them off. Did I get an adequate sleep? How much? Did I move my body? How did I do that? Did I do something fun or pleasurable just for me? Did I take time for meditation or prayer? Did I eat nutritious food? And you just check these off, like, yes, I did this. Yes, I did this. And then you record an act of kindness I did for someone. My most memorable moment of the day was, and I'm grateful for. And then to empty your mind about tomorrow so that you can sleep well, you talk about tomorrow and you say, my intention for tomorrow is this. My top to-dos for tomorrow are this. Other thoughts or ideas or notes. Now, I would have to do this not in my bedroom, because I typically am asleep in 60 seconds. So I would do this like on my kitchen island before I would go to bed. And I am going to start to do this because I love the idea. And so it must be 365 pages of what you can record for yourself. And I really, really like that book, Calm the Chaos. This is the self-regulation book called Self-Reg, How to Help You and Your Child break the stress cycle and successfully engage with life. There really some fascinating, interesting research in there, and just the whole idea of self-regulation and self-care is really good. This is how I'm kind of wrapping up. Interestingly enough, I feel like sometimes families like ours should be exempt from other things that happen in life, right? Well, here's the newsflash, right? We're not. And in fact, I think that it's just the way it is. So my husband and I last week just celebrated 31 years of marriage, and we have had significant unemployment, which was unexpected, sudden unemployment from a 25-year career. We've had, my husband's lost both of his parents. I've lost my dad. We've had illness in our own family. We've had problems with depression in our family. We've had difficulty finding help. Everybody knows if you have a child that needs or gets some services of extra help, you're the one that finds the help. And there will be times, I'd be like, how can I work? I don't have enough help. Most recently, June 21st, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I've just last week completed my treatment for that. Yay. And so it's really, like Stephanie was saying at the beginning, it really occurred to me how incredibly important self-care was, because for the first time in 26 years, because Caylee was our first child, because she was no longer living in our home on a daily basis, I actually could really care for myself. And it was really great timing on God's part that's when it happened. But in really saying a positive note, and I'll say it, when I got the diagnosis and when it all came down and they realized it was a early stage cancer, the doctor told me the thing and he said, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, yeah. And I said, we've raised a child with significant special needs that's required 24-hour care all of her life. I said, she's now in a good situation, a living situation. For the first time in my life, I think I can just sort of take care of myself. And the gift that these kids give to us, and I believe this with all my heart, and I thank Caylee for this all the time, is just remarkable resilience. And I think it really can equip us to handle a lot of things, but I think it's so critical that we hand back to ourselves some of these self-care things that I've talked about so that we can go on to experience this remarkable resilience. And that's all I have. I just did list some of my references here so you have them.
So I have a question.
Okay.
It's kind of what I'm doing now. But,
right.
Not only have I had my son for 24 years, but now I have my parents, my aging parents.
Me too. I have an aging mother.
One of them has Parkinson's, the other one has Alzheimer's. It's like, never even had a chance for an empty nest. Or,
I know.
Being
I know.
to take care of people. How do you?
I know. That's when you really hope and pray that they've planned well for that stage in their life. Because again, it's like we can't do it all, and yet, I say this all the time. I'm lucky that I have 6 siblings, and that we can kind of share the load. So it's just another one of those difficult things, and it's something we didn't think about when we were just going every single day. I mean, we did think we were going to get somewhat of a break, but I wish other than that resilience that we've developed, right? I wish I had a better answer. I mean, I think all the more important that you have to really find ways to self-care. I don't think that has to take a tremendous amount of time, but I think you have to factor in at least that 10%. Yep.
We did have another comment on Facebook that said, so true about resilience. So
yeah.
Just learn how to keep bouncing back.
Yeah. I keep saying we're signing up for boring. Like we've been trying to sign up for boring for a really, really long time. Yeah. And I'm like, I hope 2020 might be the year, because I'm like, I really want to experience boring, and I haven't really had a single year that I can experience it yet. And so I want to see how that feels and see how that goes.
I did tell some people the other day that 2020 is going to be the year of no.
One of my friends once told me, I was thinking about you this morning. Actually, I was praying about you a little bit, and here's what came to my mind. No. She's like, you have got to learn to say no. And it was really actually at a time when I really didn't need to learn to say no. So we got to listen to the people that are closest to us. Sean, did you have a question?
I have a question.
Okay.
Do you have suggestions for after-school childcare when they're a teen? Can you repeat the question, please?
So do I have a suggestion for after-school care when they're a teen? I mean, I had to use my state money to hire young women that would literally just spend time with her, take her on walks, take her to the mall, do activities. So Otherwise, sometimes different school programs have buddy type of things where they have classes that they might do some integration and activities. And once in a while, I would get people of interest from things like that to do some activities with them occasionally. But typically, I always found I had to hire that or pay out of pocket.
And then the other question I had, will you describe the positive impact on your family coming off the waiting list and having her be independent in her own place?
Yeah. Like I said, it was interesting because it was so much relief after years and of a lot of vetting and looking and hoping that the right place would come open. I was thinking that I was like, woo, I am just going to be, the question is coming off the waiting list after being on it for a long time and her getting a place in a home, because all the stars have to line up. It has to be the right match. It has to be the right home. It has to be if you're living in a supported group home, it has to be the right combination of people in the home. I mean, there are so many things that have to be right. I will say, we immediately were asked to go on a vacation, literally like 2 weeks after she got in the home. And I turned to my husband and I literally was sort of paralyzed by it, because it was like, come do this with us. We're treating you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yes, because we could do it. And we had so much fun on that vacation. I mean, it was like we were all felt like we had been freed a bit. And they could see that because when you leave somebody at home, I've got the schedule of who's on next. I've got the Excel spreadsheet in front of me on vacation of who's coming on next, who's staying overnight tonight, who's on tomorrow, who's taking, it's just, it never stops. So all of that was gone. All of the schedules, all of the part that took in my brain could be enjoying the moment. And so I feel like we all enjoy things a little bit more substantially when we don't have to worry. Because I would know they would be concerned about her too. It wasn't just me. My husband would be too. But I'm the one that managed the schedule. So it's been pretty remarkable. And we're taking that in gratitude as a family that it is. And I see it in my kids' life too. I see my daughter as a teacher. I see her resilience in the classroom because of dealing with a sister like that. Our son, he says he misses her more than anybody else in the family, and now that he's at school, and I see that he's really gunning he's a Division I athlete, and it's 4 hours a day, and it's excruciating, but he's like, I can do it. I have the ability to do it compared to Caylee, compared to anything else. So it just gives you a perspective that literally I think can catapult you into some pretty remarkable achievements if that's what you'd like to do. So it's really been a blessing to our family. Anything else? We're right at 7.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And self-care is the key. 10%. That's what we have to do. Thanks so much.